Wait one more minute to make sure maybe there's just one more guest that comes in. But, oh, you're recording. That's perfect. Okay.
Oh, there's Katrina. Hi, Katrina.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
It's good to see you, Wendy.
Great to see you too.
Hi,
well,
Elena.
now that President Rogers is on, let's go. 59 minutes. And my name is Elena Nicholson, and I'm Director of Development at Fielding. Thank you all for joining this wonderful Fielder Graduate Fellows panel. And it is hosted by the Murray Fielder Center and Dr. Katie McGraw. And let me just introduce her as she will present this panel. Katie McGraw is Director of Sponsored Programs and Special Projects at Fielding. She has previously served as Associate Vice President for Sponsored Programs at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, where she established the institution's first Sponsored Programs office and grew extramural funding to over $1 million per year. For 10 years, she worked as grant administrator and director of special projects at Howard University in the office of the Vice Provost for Research and Dean of the Graduate School, working with over 300 graduate faculty members and other faculty across the university. She received her bachelor's degree from Yale University, master's degree from University of Pennsylvania and Georgetown University, and her PhD in English literature from Howard University. And thank you so much, Dr. McGraw, for hosting this panel with the Fielder Graduate Fellows. We are recording this session and it will be available online for broader Fielding community and for, most importantly, for the generous supporters of the Murray Fielder Center. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elena, and good afternoon, everyone. It is my great pleasure to be here today and speaking on behalf of our Strategic Initiatives and Research Office and Vice President Orlando Taylor. I'm so pleased that we have this opportunity to showcase one of the wonderful programs of the Murray Fielder Center for Democracy, Leadership, and Education. The center's mission is to encourage research that addresses today's educational and social problems. And we've designed it as a multidisciplinary inter-school space for Fielding faculty, Fielding students, and Fielding alumni to come together to engage in research, public discourse, and advocacy that will help to advance democracy, leadership, and education. In doing so, it promotes Murray Fielder's principles of transformational change for social justice as exemplified in her life's work and her contributions to equity and education. So I have the honor of helping to manage the Fielder Center's programs, and it's been a complete pleasure in particular to work with the Fielder Graduate Fellows. The Fielder Graduate Fellows program began in 2016, and the first group of 5 fellows was selected then for a 2-year term. One of them's graduated, but the others are still working with us and are here today. And then this summer, 2018, we selected a second group of 5 fellows. Each of the fellows are Fielding doctoral students, and each proposed a project that draws on their own research interests, but looking specifically at how that work could be applied in the context of issues of social justice in the tradition of Murray Fielder, of course. Those applications are reviewed by our Murray Fielder Center Advisory Council, which is made up of faculty and scholars who are inside and outside Fielding, and the fellows are then selected and recommended. We do try to assist and support our fellows in various ways, and I also think, of course, that they've become a wonderful community to support one another. As a group, they meet monthly and talk about all kinds of things, particularly their own progress. They share information about conferences, about funding opportunities, and all kinds of other useful resources. We also have an online space for them to share conversation and share materials, and we always try to come together when we can at Fielding sessions. And then in my sponsored programs role, I work with each of them to locate and secure external funding for their work. So as they discuss their work, I think some of the fellows will touch on some of these shared experiences and efforts and how they've been involved. But really, this is designed to be their show today, so I want to get to their presentations. I'm going to very briefly, very briefly, introduce each fellow in turn before they speak. And then in order to be sure that everyone has a full chance to make their presentation, we'll ask that anyone who has questions for any of the participants to hold those till the end. We should have plenty of time for comments from our audience participants and from one another at the end. So without further ado, our first panelist today is Robin Treto, who is a doctoral student in the Infant and Early Childhood Development Program and is coming to us from the state of Montana.
Okay, hi, thanks Katie, and hello to everyone. So I have been a Marie Fielder Center since the first cohort, and the research I proposed was initially a review study, but I think due to the importance of the topic, I felt the need to go beyond that. And so I did write a grant to help with one piece of what I'll talk about today. So basically, I think that what people think about babies who are born with problems makes a difference in how those babies learn and grow. And what professionals like doctors and early intervention workers think really matters, because their ideas of what a baby can do affects what families think the babies can do, which then changes the way parents might engage with the babies and how the babies might respond back to their parents in terms of the challenges and what they try to do. Now, this is not parents' fault because they really want to do what the parents tell them might be the best. So in terms of the research, what we first needed was evidence that there was bias in these groups. So for my dissertation, I found that 93% of the children's doctors I sampled, it was a small sample of just 56, but they had high levels of hidden bias against people with intellectual disabilities. And most of them judged a few-day-old infant who had just vague signs of a disability-related diagnosis, like trisomy 21, cerebral palsy, or fetal alcohol effects, to have a lot less social, intellectual, and daily living skills than an infant who had a more neutral diagnosis like meconium aspiration syndrome. And we looked also, a small group with the grant I mentioned, looked at early intervention workers and found that 95% of that sample had biases against people with disabilities. And in that group, we also did a one-day, 6-hour intervention, and we were able to reduce that down to 72% after our 6-hour training on bias awareness. So our next steps are to try to fund and roll out these and similar studies to large national samples of pediatricians and early intervention workers. Maybe we'll add videos of babies to see if that changes how the bias plays out, and we'll also build tools. And we think that measuring and reducing professional biases against disabilities will help more babies learn, grow, and be all that they can be by giving people, parents, and other people more hope when poor outcomes are expected based on a diagnosis that an infant might have when it's born. And I'm very grateful to the Marie Fielder Center for the opportunity to really dig into this topic.
Thank you very much, Robin. That was wonderful. Okay, our next speaker is Greg Williams, who comes to us from Tennessee, and he is a student in the Human Organization Development Program.
Thank you, Katie. My dissertation's title asks, how can truth claims of voter fraud influence public policy, a political discourse analysis? And I address how the repetition of truth claims produce wide acceptance. I argue that cognitive bias and deception play significant roles, and I examine the public discourse of voter fraud. So my dissertation asks two vital questions. First, how do proponents of strict voter ID laws frame their cases for relevant legislation? And then where does this research originate that they cite in state legislative hearings to support their claims? So using Kansas's Secure and Fair Elections Act, I wanted to understand how voter ID proponents successfully influence legislation. The units of analysis are testimonial letters that Secretary of State Chris Kobach presented from citizens and experts, including himself, to persuade the Kansas Senate Committee on Ethics and Elections to pass a restrictive voting law. And I applied a content analysis to the disciplines of political discourse analysis and discourse analysis of racism. The three broad emergent themes include voter fraud, voter ID as the solution, and immigration, or more commonly, illegal aliens. Then I scrutinized the sources that voter ID proponents used, and I'm now in the concluding chapter where my arguments have emerged from 5 primary findings that formed a definite pattern. First, the voter ID proponents continually repeat that voter fraud is an endemic national crisis that's changing our election outcomes to favor Democrats who are guilty of willful blindness to undermine U.S. democracy. Second, the voter ID advocates vilify their political opponents, non-European immigrants and large urban centers, by creating images of diseased, dishonest, violent animals who want to impose their lifestyles on white America. Third, the GOP political actors manipulate their audience by cultivating solidarity, dividing them, the out group, from us, the in group. And fourth, with repeated urgency, the voter ID champions press their legislators to take legislative action to fulfill their oaths to their constituencies. And then finally, the voter ID proponents offer an excessive number of anecdotes and downright lies from biased, even racist sources. However, they cannot cite one empirical datum to support their truth claims. So I also recently submitted a proposal for a postdoctoral Fulbright project, which Katrina was a big help to me. And building on the fields of political sociology and political economy, that research would consist of investigating the underpinnings of the Ecuadorian economy to shed light on the interplay of inequality and politics. And it would give or serve further as a foundation for my future classroom teaching and research. And it would be conducted at the Latin American Faculty of Social Sciences in Ecuador. So using a world systems perspective, the research problem considers how the core nation states or the global hegemonic powers can influence the peripheral and semi-peripheral southern countries and exploit their natural resources such as oil. I'd be interviewing high-ranking Ecuadorian and U.S. government officials of departments such as the State, Interior, Commerce, and EPA, insights from the UN, the Chamber of Commerce, and EP Petroecuador, which is the state-owned oil enterprise, also would be very important. And then also the representatives of Ecuador's ecotourism industry and environmental groups. I'm also looking at trying to get some papers published that Rich Applebaum, my mentor, has offered to help me with, and maybe trying to get something published in the Washington Post for an op-ed that would make use of some of the data that I compiled from a dissertation that I'm not able to use for that. So that's where I stand right now.
Thank you very much, Greg. Look
Thank
forward
you.
to hearing more about it. All right, our next speaker will be Wendy Muhlhauser, who writes and is also known as SissyMarySue, and she's a doctoral student in the Educational Leadership for Change program and is joining us from Minnesota.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. So, Katie's going to help me with the recording. I'm going to try to fly through this as quickly as I can. So I'm honored to be a Marie Fielder Fellow. Beyond my mind. So thank you so much. Next slide. Okay, so that's my thank you. And representing Marie Fielder Center for Democracy, Leadership, and Education is really an honor. So next slide. So my dissertation is going to be surrounding empathy and racial equality, and it's based on my children's book, Jelly Beans, the Cheetah, and Hope. Another component that's really important to me is showing that where we use play, it helps students better understand empathy because they can embody the feelings and the emotions of the characters. There's a musical play that will be coming up this fall based on the book. Next slide. So collaboration with interns surrounding social justice is such a huge strategy, I believe, to help in this area. None of the books that I've done would exist if it weren't for high school age kids and college age students getting credit from their schools. Next slide. So Jelly Beans, the Cheetah, and Hope is a series. Book 1 is on the left, and book 2 is Jelly Beans, the Cheetah, and Hope, Empathy Airlines. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Diversity in books is infinitely important, and not just diversity in books and in media and in technology and film and TV and everything. We need to make sure that kids see themselves represented. You see in this book that I have a female Black pilot, I have a Black executive on the plane, It's so important for kids to see minority characters in positions of power and accomplishment and authority. In the lower left corner, you see a picture of girls having to travel at night miles and miles to where a water source is to gain water for the tribe so they cannot go to school. So issues surrounding girls is very important to me as well. Next slide. Trustee Sparkles, The Teacher and Others Who Shine. This was, the impetus for this was Kitty Kelly Epstein's class, where she drew my attention to the disparity in education for minority teachers. So I wanted to make sure that the teacher was a female Black woman. She's a very important character in the story. And in the classroom in this book, it's beautifully diverse. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. I believe as a scholar artist, I think I've got a unique ability to impact innovative, creative modalities. In a Theories of Change class that I had, I really got to thinking about how, because I'm outside of the system to a certain degree as an author, as a playwright, as a lyricist, I'm able to impact in a unique way. And I have a vantage point that I think comes from a place of power, positive power. Next slide. The musical play this fall, as I wrote the script for this play, I made sure to dig deeper and have Mbisha, the village elder character, be the hero. The focus with the people I'm coordinating this with, it's a children's theater group and then H2O for Life, so it's focused on a cause. But even still, I wanted to make sure to take the opportunity to show the beauty of the village elder. Now, this play was going to be played in a very affluent white community, and it was a concern of mine that that it was quite possibly going to be cast to a young man, maybe about 12, 13, not of color. And so I asked the director who does the casting, I said, may I bring in a teacher friend of mine who has a beautiful, amazing spirit? And I said, he is the one who can capture the depth and get the point across about the Black man being the true hero. I have an exchange between the humanitarian really giving it back to Mbisha, the Black male in the story, with his beauty and his empathy and his ability to lead and love and care. Next slide. Dunnigan Bower is another book, and you probably recognize, or maybe you don't, but this is my friend Cornelius. He's the face of an amazing, beloved Black teacher who really is in real life a beloved Black teacher. And I'm making sure that, that this book shows the beauty of that person's accomplishment. Next slide. This, I think, is a really important point. When I was in my advanced systems class, Ashby's law of requisite variety just jumped out at me. It simply states it's the notion about variety absorbing variety. So it's the notion where when one seeks to change any complex system, one needs to apply as much complexity to counter the system that the system possesses. And when I contemplate that and I think about multimedia, books, musical plays, technology, gaming, TV, film, and then my supplemental things that I do with programs, some toys, a board game I'm creating, readings I can do, speeches I can do, CILC virtual author readings I can do. I know that this is going to help me counter the complexity of intolerance with the variety of ways I can offer the same messages of racial equality to challenge it. This fall in my media technology and disruptive innovation class, I plan to lay out the specifics of a TV show I've actually been contemplating for about 20 years. But coincidentally, the characters of the different books that I'm creating are now going to be what I'm using within the show to show the strength of racial equality that can be helped, that can be advanced through the exposure of young people. Next slide. So this one I'm not going to go through, but it's just me laying out the application of requisite variety with the tools, my capabilities, and then components of it. But go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, this is an important one for me. Partners, mentors, moral and financial support. I am really merely only the sum of my parts. I wouldn't be me without my mentors, the interns, support from everyone, and that continues today. I seek support to become a highly competent speaker, regionally, nationally, and internationally about the need for and effort to advance racial equality. I would like to successfully collaborate with Black and other minority scholars, activists, and educators on panel presentations otherwise, and to co-author academic and non-academic work. I think that coming from a place of unity in this way can be powerful. I seek also to support, to have some support in acquiring knowledge as far as the process and production and distribution of music and plays and TV and film in a broader way to a broader audience that I'm familiar with. I want to get the message out again through that TV show with the idea of racial equality, and then I'll also have components of science, so about conservation, clean water, and so much more. I'm sure I've gone over my time. Thank you so much for listening. And you can take a look at my website or the CILC platform where I will be doing video conferencing to schools and other organizations. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. All right, our next speaker will be Jenny Johnson-Riley from the Human and Organization Development Doctoral Program, and she is going to be speaking to us from Washington State.
Well, take off your... Oh.
Can you hear me now? Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Katie, and thank you for having us, giving us this opportunity to share our research today. So my research is really drawn from my own personal background in activism and my professional background in the movement to end violence against women. And my dissertation study is a history of the anti-rape movement in particular, with an emphasis on looking at the intersections of race and gender and how those have come together to shape the direction of the movement. What's interesting for me is that I started this research before Me Too and Time's Up really started to kick off. And in some ways, when I have conversations with people, they're always asking me, that's kind of fortuitous. And I think that really speaks to our understanding of history of social movements. And we tend to think about this social moment as being something that just happened. And I think really it's important to understand the trajectory of changes in empowerment of women, especially with respect to eliminating sexual violence over time. And we need to understand that so that we can understand why the movement progressed, why it may have not been as successful in some areas and why that is, so that we can become more effective advocates for change. So my dissertation research was a qualitative mixed method that combined interviews with 22 activists. I had a cross-racial sample of 12 white women and 10 women of color. And then I also combined that with analysis of archival data. There were several sources of that, a lot of journals from earlier periods in the movement. But one source that I really wanted to highlight today was the work that I did with an activist named Laura X. She has been involved in anti-rape activism and other social movements since the late 60s, and she was particularly well known for doing work in criminalizing marital rape, which was not a crime in all 50 states until 1993. So I had the opportunity to meet with Laura over the phone, and she invited me to come to St. Louis to view her archive. She had founded and run the National Clearinghouse for Marital and Date Rape for several years, and over that period of time had collected around, she had 600 boxes of archives of materials, some of which, and additional material that had already been donated to different universities. So that source had never really been gone through in a comprehensive way. I didn't have the opportunity over the week that I was there with her to go through it in a comprehensive way, but her archivists were extremely helpful in helping me identify, some important pieces that were relevant to my research. And since my time with her in March, she's gone on to find a permanent home for her collection, and it's recently been acquired by the University of Houston. So they're in transition, getting that from St. Louis to Houston. In terms of my Fielder Center project, what I really wanted to do was find a way to make my dissertation research and findings accessible to activists in a way that would be useful for them. So what I'm doing as I complete my final chapter of my dissertation is looking towards how to combine a document that I'm titling An Activist Guide to the History of the Anti-Rape Movement, which I'm really going to be distilling some of those lessons that I talked about earlier that I think will be helpful for activists to know. So we don't feel like we're working in a vacuum, and we don't feel like we're having to reinvent the wheel. And then the other piece that I wanted to add is that on a more academic perspective, from a more academic perspective, I'm going to be speaking on a panel at the National Women's Studies Association conference in November with 2 other fielding alums, and we're going to be talking about the role of white women in advancing racial equality. And so I'm going to be able to talk a little bit about some of my methodological learnings from my dissertation and conducting cross-racial research, kind of some things that I've learned, but also the importance of that. And I also just wanted to take a moment to express my thanks and gratitude to the Marie Fielder Center. It's been a fantastic opportunity to work with my cohort. We have a great community of just support and also exchanging ideas and resources, and also thank Katie, who's been a wonderful, invaluable resource really in helping us identify funding sources and also helping us kind of tailor and write grant proposals. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jenny. So our next fellow will be Patricia Maxwell, who lives in Nebraska, and she is a doctoral student in the media psychology program.
Hi, I'm going to try to see if I can start the video here. Ah, it works, and my hair is a fright. Okay. Well, first of all, thanks so much for giving me this opportunity to share what I'm working on. And it's so exciting to see everybody and hear about what you all are up to. It was great meeting you there in Chicago. So my project is about, I'm in the media psychology, but it really comes out of my prior life experiences. My background, my personal history is I'm an activist. I've always found myself involved in all kinds of interesting things. And after 9/11 especially, I became quite involved in all sorts of things in my community of Los Angeles at the time, and was down in Los Angeles, part of the marches, and was, pulling together rallies in grassroots events. And one of our speakers that we presented pulled several thousand people to the presentation, and it was a wonderful experience. And it was also very disheartening because at the end of the day, we didn't stop the Iraq War, right? So I remember thinking, oh, all that work and nothing happened, and feeling so dissatisfied with that experience, and trying to understand what it means to be a part of a social movement and a democracy that seemed like it didn't have any impact. And now moving fast forward, 17 years later after 9/11, and now with more academic and life experience, and still being involved in my community and trying to have a voice and speak for those who I feel are underserved in many ways. I really feel honored to be a part of this Fielder project, and I'm working on a study that came out of the Parkland shootings this last February, and I gathered up about 1.5 million tweets, and I am going to have to still figure out how I'm going to analyze them, although the methodology is going to be mixed methodology. I know that for certain. I just don't know to what extent. It's going to involve some coding of the tweets. I do know that. I'm almost certain that there's going to be some interviewing of the individuals, they're now in college, the couple of the individuals who were part of that organizing the marches on March 24th. But I really am dissecting how the social media component either helped or didn't help or confused their efforts to get their message out, and the overall outcome of that. But maybe even more so, looking at that according to just social movement theory over time, and putting it into a longer lens perspective, I guess, of you know, what does it mean to be a part of a democracy, and why is it important that we have a voice? After all, social media is a technology. I know the Arab Springs, it was hailed as it's going to be the answer to all things, but it is, after all, just a tool. So I'm interested in really dissecting that. But my Fielder project in particular, I'm looking to find a way of applying this information and this study in ways that people can use. And what I mean by that is giving this information and bringing it back out to individuals wherever they are and whatever their level of education might be, into tools that they might be able to use for things that they care about. So I'm actually looking at working at putting together a smartphone application that people can use, where if they wanted to either just learn more about how social movements develop and how they tie into social media, they can go on this app and kind of go through an interactive experience and see what it would be like to create something that they would then, you know, put out through various social media platforms. Maybe it'd be an online component as well, with a little bit more, you know, interactive video or literature as well. So I'm looking and teaming up with people. I've been networking with a lot of people, and since going at the Chicago session, I've been meeting up with a lot of different people with different skill sets, and I've been talking with a lot of different application groups and trying to figure out how I might be able to work with them. There's some people that I should give shout outs to. First of all, I met with Jenny, and she referred to me a couple of great books, which, thank you, Jenny. I ordered those and sped through those. I'm in the process of getting through a lot of historical data as well, so that I have that as a real good foundation. I also was able to work with my cohort, Tatiana Elcour. She's actually a year ahead of me in the media psychology program, and we had some really wonderful conversations about the Arab Springs and some of the other things that are happening there in her area of the world. And so I have been speaking with her quite a bit about social movements just in general, and have garnered a lot of information, just real-time information from her. My advisor, Gary Hare, Dan Sewell, is working with me. I've also am looking and hoping to partner with the SRI and a company called Quid when the time comes. And both of these companies, they offer some really amazing tools, and they have suggested that when the time is right, if I come back to them and I have some funding, that they would be able to work with me on some sort of research project. So I'm looking forward to that. And I've been working with some tools called Discover Text and Netlytics and a whole bunch of other things. And I'm in the process of learning Python just so that I can work with programmers easier and better at developing this app that I want to deliver to the general public. So this coming year, top of my list, I'm working on grants, and that's one of the heavy duty jobs for the weekend. And I've got on my list to produce for academic publications a couple of things. And I've got a list of publications that I'm interested in presenting to. So that's where I'm at in my project. And again, thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Pat. Okay, next we will hear from Susan Eddington, who is actually also a media psychology doctoral student and lives in New York City.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Well, I was trying to start the video, but I don't know if you can see me. That's not me on the screen. But anyway, thank you so much for this opportunity. I truly appreciate it, and I appreciate being a member of the first cohort of the Marie Fielder Center for Democracy, Leadership, and Education. My particular research is a content analysis of media representations of Black women in prime time, whether we've made progress, whether there's been regression, or whether it's the status quo. I was brought to this research because I have spent most of my life as an activist in the women's movement. I lobbied for ERA in 1973 and was also involved and learned about the difference in issues that affected Black women compared to the issues that affected white women. So I have continued to work in that area. I've been president and led many organizations that work for gender empowerment and increasing political opportunities for women. I've been an elected official. You know, I've done a lot, and I've had a lot of opportunity to see the disparity that impacts particularly Black women. So my interest in media representations is because media is our primary cultural influencer and holds a tremendous sway in attitudes and behavior, particularly in terms of how people regard others with race. So when we're talking about intergroup relations. So I develop programs beyond my work has always included communication strategy, issues management, and developing strategies to address problems. So this was one I chose to tackle, probably because it's been a lifelong concern. But my work since I've been at Fielding has looked at media representations and media effects. And I have a longer term interest in media literacy. So my Fielder project is partnering with the Congressional Caucus on Multicultural Media. And this particular body, this particular caucus in Congress looks at media, how people of color particularly are shown in various forms, on television and film and games, opportunities for people of color in media, and generally everything that surrounds how media impacts our lives. So I was very fortunate that they were enthusiastic when I called them about a potential partnership. So on October 4th, I will moderate a roundtable that's being presented by the Congressional Caucus on Multicultural Media. And we'll talk about not just the findings of my research, but my findings perhaps of the meta-analysis and the research that I've been conducting since I've been in the program at Fielding, which has looked at these issues and the consequences of these issues. So the roundtable will bring together scholars, business leaders from around the country, some of global multinational corporations, and people who are interested in issues of diversity and inclusion, other educators and activists. And we will look at media representation and my research as a point of departure, and to develop a conversation about how do people cope. We will look at what's positive, the progress that we have made, and where we are now, and what should be supported and encouraged, what can be replicated, and how do you help people to mitigate the negative consequences. So Black women historically have not been seen much on television, but now there is a rash of programming that has Black women as the primary character. So that might be a good thing. It is a good thing if the characters are portrayed with more depth and complexity than they have historically been shown, but that's what my research will explore. So beyond the roundtable, because that's just to launch the conversation, I have proposed, and the caucus has agreed to support me in developing a national conversation that looks at media representations, not just of Black women, but of women of color, and how those representations impact their well-being. So when we talk about their well-being, we're talking about not just racial oppression or intolerance or issues regarding diversity and inclusion, but also economic injustice. We talk about healthcare and criminal justice, and just the perceptions that are formed that impact how people live. The goal is to address the racism that's in our faith. It's not hidden. It's no longer something that's under the table. So we have to have a bolder approach in addressing this issue. So I'm very pleased to have a congressional caucus that has agreed to work with me in making this happen. And the many corporations that have come on board that have said, yes, this is a very important conversation, and let's talk about what we can do to move it forward. So thanks again. This is something I could talk about forever, but I won't. Where I am now, as I said, is I'm preparing for the roundtable, which is October 4th, which is coming up very shortly, and then raising money for the national discussion. The nationwide discussion we will encourage a series of small group discussions, reaching out to sororities, college campuses, civic organizations, religious organizations, and any other kind of body that we can appeal to that would have an interest in hosting conversations about this. We will develop a discussion guide. We will present the work of various scholars. The roundtable will be live streamed, and we will record that and just look at how we can encourage people to talk about these issues and look at solutions. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan. We look forward to that event. And so we have one more speaker today, Dawn Murphy. And Dawn is also in Washington State and is also a Human and Organization Development doctoral student.
Hi, everybody. I'm not sure if you can see me, but I'm just going to plow forward here. I am a Marie Fielder Fellow from cohort number 1 with Jenny and Robin and a couple other, and also Susan. My research area is the U.S. folk school movement. And if you're familiar with folk schools, one of the most famous folk schools in the country is the Highlander Center. And in the last 2 decades, there has been a dramatic increase in the number of folk schools. In 2001, there were approximately 21 schools identified, and now there are 98. And most of them are within 10 years old. So my Marie Fielder project was to explore the current U.S. folk school movement, to get involved with the Folk Education Association of America, and to create a network of new historic and long-serving folk schools to support that movement and to explore what kind of contributions they can make to North America. So I have just been very pleased and honored to be a part of this just amazing cohort, and also to benefit from the collaborative process with the cohort, and also getting support from the Marie Fielder Center. And so that my Marie Fielder Fellowship started in 2016. In the fall of 2017, I applied for a social transformation project grant through the Building Inclusion Council. And that grant was to really support face-to-face and regional meetings of the Folk School Network. That was awarded. We're looking forward to a second year of funding through that. So that was a small grant of $8,000. But also in early spring, I really examined the work that I had done through Marie Fielder as well as the Social Transformation Project, and was able to, based on all of that work, put together a collaborative process and grant application for federal funding, which will be awarded on October 1st. So it's a 2-year community-based research project, and the funding will provide approximately $100,000 in the first year and $100,000 in the second year. So I want to be able to share with this group just what the investment through the Marie Fielder Fellowship, the small investment and support through the Social Transformation Project has done to be able to get me to a point where I could really submit for a substantial grant and be awarded that grant. And I have a lot of pride in that project and research will be funded, and I attribute a lot of that success to this group and to the Marie Fielder Center and to the Building Inclusion Council at Fielding. I really think that it's going to be an absolutely amazing experience that will provide for what Fielding really represents, and even more so Marie Fielder, of what a scholar practitioner does. We're not only doing research, but we are engaging with communities across the country and in many cases across the world. And the support that Marie Fielder Center provides lets us do that in a very tangible and expansive way. So thank you, Marie Fielder. Thank you, Katie McGraw. Thank you, Orlando Taylor, and all of my cohort mates for that. I'm very excited to get started on my project. And I can't say enough for the support that I've gotten through this.
Well, thank you very much, Dawn. We're very proud of you, and we're very proud of all the fellows. So I want to say another huge thank you to all of the fellows for your presentations today. We just have amazing scholar practitioners at Fielding, and you are shining examples of that and of everything that the Fielder Center is established for. We do have about 10 minutes before the hour for questions or comments from our audience participants, and I see that a few new audience members joined us as we went along. So if anyone has a question for any of our fellows, we welcome you to introduce who you are and let us know your questions. You may have to unmute yourselves if we muted you while they were speaking.
Katie, this is Anna.
Hi, Anna.
Hi. I have to run actually off to go to an appointment at 2, so I'm going to ask and run, or I'm going to ask and listen and then run. So thank you for tolerating that. I wonder if any of I'm thinking about 2 questions, and so I would like any of the fellows to answer either question. One is, in some ways, you all and your work embodies what I and others at Fielding have thought of as one of the distinctive things about Fielding, which is that our students do work that has real life consequences, that is very much connected to the real world, not only in terms of a perspective on those issues, but actually is change oriented. It promotes action. It promotes change. And so I'd like some sense from you of how we can make that both clearer and clearer to all internal fielding constituencies, support it better to all fielding constituencies, and also use it as a way of attracting more attention to fielding as a rather unique doctoral institution. So I'm looking for advice there about how to spread what you all represent inside and outside the institution. So that's one thing. That's one question. Another question could be, how did your work, is your work changing, or did your work change because of something you learned at fielding? How is it different because of something you learned? And that can be either through coursework or just through the ether. I don't know, it doesn't have to be formal. I'm just wondering if you can point to some specific influence that fielding had on the direction and formulation of your work. So thank you.
I can speak to both of those. I'll go to your second question first, and that is, for me, it's strategy. The theories of change class and the systems, and then the advanced systems class gave me specific knowledge as far as how to look at impacting social justice change, so that's that one for me. And then the other one, I think Jean-Pierre is doing such a great job of capturing. He took some video of Lugene and Donna when they began at their NSO. I think doing video of people with the specifics of who they are could be really quite compelling, because it's so fun to hear everybody today. Everybody is just passionate and has such amazing ideas and initiatives. So I think video could be a representation, and then I'll let other people weigh in.
Well, always, for me, fielding is everything. I would not have had even the thought in my head to do anything that I did in terms of my project. And then also I'm part of Josh Bader's incubator group. So it's a support group he has for researchers in the IECD program. And so it's really great because we meet once a week and provide one-on-one support for these types of ideas. So I guess even one way to roll it forward would be for fielding to consider those kind of small cluster groups, lots of different places, because it's really been very powerful for us to just, what he does is he goes through and just has people review their project for the week, and you get anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes, maybe a bit more if you're having a knotty problem, and people weigh in, and you feel like you're not isolated, because it's hard for me to think about doing research in isolation. So that's all I have to say.
I could add my 2 cents worth on that. Well, for me, I caught a break in 2016. I submitted four abstracts to the American Sociological Association for their annual conference meeting, and I got four papers accepted. So I gave 4 presentations. And that was a really good way, I think, for students, professors too, for that matter, but especially for someone such as ourselves, submitting papers to conferences is a great way. If you can get accepted and be able to give a presentation at a national conference, that's a great way to get the word out. And as far as being able to determine a research project, I started out looking at doing something more generally about structural inequality or economic inequality, looking at the democratic effects of the inequalities in America. And when I took the course, the KA, I did a double KA with Rich and Keith Melville on structural inequality and then the social and environmental justice one. And when I was doing my research on inequality, economic inequality, I started looking at I just started looking at voter fraud as an issue, which had always been a subject that was of interest to me. But I found out that in doing that for one of my KAs, that there was not one piece of empirical research that gave an argument that voter fraud was a serious, widespread problem that happens systematically in the U.S. So that's really what helped me find, just doing the KA work opened up my eyes to something that I really didn't perceive before I started my program. And this was in my first or my second semester. So second trimester, I guess. That's all.
I can add to that too. I think that with respect to the first question, Anna, about how can we continue to engage and support, I think kind of collaboration with other institutions, as well as increasing financial support for students, because I think this was something that really came to light a lot through some of the Building Inclusion Council is, how, and it's not anything new, I think, for Fielding to realize how expensive it is and how much support students need. And I will say with that, though, that I've seen a lot of change in a positive direction during my time at Fielding. I've seen a lot more opportunities for scholarships. And I think, through the Fielder Center and other programs, opportunities to collaborate on external grants has been really helpful, and also increases, awareness of the university. With respect to your second question about changes for me, I think I would point to the cluster around transformative learning for social change in HOD, and some of the intensives that I did as part of that, like with the Highlander Center and other intensives in different parts of the country, having the opportunity to visit with communities that were applying some of the theories of change that we were learning in action, and to really understand the systemic nature of problems, rather than seeing them through an individual lens, has probably been the biggest thing for me.
This is Susan, and to your first question, I have to agree with Greg. I have presented my research a number of times and have been invited to international conferences in a number of places. And when I talk about media psychology, people don't know anything about the field. So they're always amazed at how media can influence attitudes of racism and intolerance. And that's an eye-opener. And then I talk about the fact that the PhD program at Fielding is the first of its kind, certainly in the U.S., and people are always impressed by that and the work. But the second part of your question, what the exciting thing for me was, because so much of my work throughout my career has included developing strategy to affect attitudes and behavior. When I came to Fielding, I learned to do the research to support my work as opposed to having to hire someone to do my work. But beyond that, what was really exciting was to understand the science behind how attitudes and behavior are formed, or how media influences how attitudes and behavior are formed or affected. And so it was that knowledge that really that excited me, and honestly, I share it everywhere I go. When people hear about my work, and especially because I delve so deeply into how attitude, not only how these negative attitudes are formed, but also the use of media as a tool for pro-social behavior. And so it has just caught a lot of attention, and people are as interested in the various topics that I'm interested in exploring. And this is all a result of the things that I was exposed to in this program, and the possibilities of how to use the media as a tool for pro-social change. So it opened up a world that took me beyond what I did for a living to understand how it happened and to be able to use it in a much broader sense, and then to apply it not just to what's happening in a local environment, but to be able to look at how it could have, how there are global consequences, and the very work that I'm doing could be applied to so many situations. So honestly, I tell people you cannot imagine how absolutely thrilled I am with the work, the education I've gotten at Fielding, and the support that I've gotten from everyone at Fielding, and being invited to be a fellow of the Marie Fielder Center for Democracy, Leadership, and Education really just paralleled the work that I've done all my life. And so it just felt like a natural thing. And then the support there has been tremendous. Katie is always right there to help you try to find funding for whatever I can dream up. And really that level of support and encouragement means a lot when you're blazing a new trail.
Thank you, Susan. I know we're actually past the hour, and I want to respect the time of both our panelists and our attendees. So I do want to start to wind up here, unless there's any other absolutely burning questions, or we certainly will want to connect anyone who participated with any of the fellows after the meeting. So we will certainly try to do that as well. So before we go, I want to once again thank all of our inspiring, passionate, wonderful fellows for their presentations today. I said at the beginning that it's been one of my greatest pleasures and honors, and this is just a great example of why, both for their presentations and for everything they do at Fielding. And thank all of you who were part of the call for being a part of this webinar, and I hope that you all enjoyed hearing a little bit about the Graduate Fellows Program. So thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. This is Katrina. What a delight to hear about your work. Just excellent work. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. And we're also already getting requests for the recording for people who could not join the call. So we will be sharing it, the recording of this amazing discussion Fielding-wide. Thank you, everyone, for your time. And thank you, Katie, for putting this wonderful panel together to represent the work of our wonderful fellows in the Marie Fielder Center.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you. Thank you, Katrina. So everyone, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day and your evening, and we will be sharing the recording widely very soon. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.